Welcome to the Thyroid Fixer podcast, where we dive deep into the world of thyroid and hormones, especially for you ladies navigating perimenopause and menopause, and really for anyone struggling with hypothyroidism. I'm your host, Dr. Amy, thyroid and hormone specialist and CEO of a global telemedicine practice where we prescribe the right thyroid treatment and bioidentical hormones to all 50 states and most of Canada, helping you become that badass human that you're meant to be. So if you're battling weight gain and hair loss, you can't lose weight no matter what you do, your energy levels are plummeting and your libido left town, then you're in the right place and you have found your tribe. Remember, I want you to embrace every inch of that badass woman that you truly are. So if you're ready to dive in and fix things, let's get started. Let's talk about aging and how to age better. Research suggests that a big contributor to poor aging is senescent cells, better known as zombie cells. They're old, worn out cells that can linger in your body after their useful function, wasting your energy and nutritional resources on them. As we age, senescent cells often accumulate in our bodies, contributing to sluggish energy, less flexibility, slower workout recovery, or simply put, the middle-aged feeling. But in the last 10 years, research has come out that has identified plant-derived ingredients, which can actually help our bodies naturally eliminate these zombie senescent cells. These ingredients are called senolytics. The easiest way to get complete senolytic support is a formula I love called Qualia Senolytic. It's almost like a monthly cleanse for aging. You take Qualia Senolytic just 2 days a month, and it's loaded with science-backed vegan senolytic ingredients that help your body naturally eliminate the zombie cells. It can literally help your body feel 10 years younger in just a couple months. I've been doing it the last few months, and I'm just happy that I'm doing it. I know I'm doing a good thing for my body. So you want to go to neurohacker.com/thyroid to try senolytic with a 100-day money-back guarantee. You can't beat that. And the code thyroid will also get you 15% off your first order. So that's neurohacker.com, neurohacker.com/thyroid, THYROID, for Qualia Senolytic. And remember the code thyroid for 15% off to start aging better. I made Hormone Fixer for you to get more of that GSD hormone. You want adequate levels of testosterone in order to have motivation, in order to burn fat, in order to build sexy, lean muscle that is not only going to make you better at burning fat every single day, it's also going to protect you. It's going to protect you as you age. It's going to protect your bones. You want sexy, lean muscle in order to have a metabolism. So get some Hormone Fixer. Start taking it and just enjoy the benefits. What we have been hearing from the community of people taking it, improved energy, improved strength. They're seeing their muscles pop out and look amazing when they're working out. They're getting that pump. They're having a libido. They actually want to have sex again. You cannot go wrong with Hormone Fixer. It increases your growth hormone. It increases your testosterone. The cis quadrangulus, and it helps your bones. The Tonkat Ali helps keep your sex hormone binding globulin low, which we want that as well. So it's not bound up to our thyroid hormones and testosterone. Try the Hormone Fixer. Trust me, it's going to change your world. If questions of menopause are swirling around your head and you really just don't know how to tackle this time of life, or you're in perimenopause and you're thinking, should I start hormones? What are these little symptoms that are popping up? Why is my vagina dry? Why am I getting really hot and agitated all of a sudden? Then you need to listen to this episode. We are breaking apart great menopause myths. And this even includes you perimenopausal ladies too, because this is the time where you have to pay attention to your body and know the signs and symptoms and know what to do with it. Is it time to do some lifestyle and nutrition changes, or is it time to start looking into hormone replacement? And then myself and my guests, Kristen and Maria, we also dove into our own personal stories of what it was like to enter menopause, what happened to our bodies, and then what did we do about it? So enjoy this episode. This is for all my peri and meno ladies out there. Maria and Kristen, thank you so much for joining me today. And I just want to have, the best conversation ever about menopause, because I don't think enough women have these types of conversations with their friends.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do today. And yes, I mean, you wrote a freaking amazing book called The Great Menopause Myth. We were talking off air before we came on, and I was telling you guys how beautifully, amazingly written this is, because it is a guide. It is a full blown, you touch on everything in here that women need to know guide. So we're going to get into certain things in here that I absolutely love and want to cover. But I want to just start off by talking just as we would if we were sitting down having coffee, and let's bring all the other women listeners into the conversation, and let's talk about menopause and what it means and what it's like and all of that. So let's just do that. So thanks for jumping on today. I'll start there.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
I mean, all right. So Maria, let's start with you. How old are you? When did you go into menopause? And how did that even feel making that transition? Did you have symptoms? Was it tough? Tell me about that.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So I'm just turned 56. I would say I was fully menopausal by 47. And I guess I really felt in the throes of perimenopause at around 45 was when it really hit. And, I never had a hot flash. I like to joke and say the only hot flash I had was I was standing in the Austin airport going back to New York City, and I realized that I showed up 24 hours late for my flight. I had a hot flash then.
I think that was an anxiety attack.
But thank God I didn't have a ton of hot flashes. I think mood, I just started to feel cranky and disconnected from my husband, kind of like wanting to isolate, not really caring about being social anymore, and sleep for sure. And then surprisingly, vaginal dryness, like really young, at like 45, 46. And I was like, what is this? And I mean, I knew what it was, but I was like, wow, that's a very kind of odd manifestation so early in the process.
Yeah. So those symptoms started coming on. And then what did you decide to do about it? Like, you kind of knew, okay, this is happening. Did your periods get wonky? What were your next steps?
Yeah, it's also a really great question. So early on, I kind of turned my nose up at HRT. It was very early in the process. And I was like, I've been a natural girl my whole life. Why would I do that? Very quickly turned around. Very, very quickly. Thankfully, I've had some really amazing mentors, and, just you have this change in almost worldview, right? From natural, why would I do that, to holy smokes, I do need to do that. It's not about symptoms. I don't have a ton of symptoms. Like, I'm not, putting on massive amounts of weight and just like, can't move throughout my day. Like, I still was a high functioning person, but I was able to connect to the fact that it's a really significant sea change in a woman's body and her health. And I was like, okay, make total sense. It was hormones from about age 48 on for me. HRT, full HRT, estradiol, progesterone. Ended up adding testosterone later, but that's been great.
Thanks for being transparent about that, because I know a lot of women out there. I've heard it from my patients as well. I don't really want to take a medication. I don't want to be on that the rest of my life. Or do I have to be on hormones the rest of my life? Now, to that I answer, you're not going to want to go off the hormones. Like, when you feel really good, you don't take that away that's making you feel good. But I hear that so often, and I'm glad you're kind of bridging that topic, because it's so hard to convince women that, like, yeah, but hormones aren't like the antidepressant that you're on because your doctor thinks that you need it, but you really need hormones. Like, that's the medication that you want to go off of, and you want to put in the hormones.
I mean, I still deal with it with my own husband, who's supposed to be kind of holistically minded. Like, I just about 9 months ago got him on testosterone, and I think he's doing quite well. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, I'll do this, but I don't like having to use exogenous substances. And I'm like, just shut up and put it on.
Mine's the same way. I get it. I know. Mine's the same way.
So,
Yeah. All right, Kristen, what about you? Like, what was your journey like?
Yeah, I mean, it was similar in some of my lack of symptoms, but pretty different from Maria's overall. So I'm 54. I was very hormonally depleted after my third child, which was about 32, and was offered antidepressants, was offered sleep meds, was offered all the things, and ultimately took an IUD. Didn't know any better at the time. You know, if I could go back and reverse it, I would, but I did go with the Myren IUD, which, as we know, is a progestin. No, my mom died of breast cancer. So the fact that anyone was offering me, and she had it quite young. So the fact that anyone offered me a progestin was just literal malpractice, but we won't get into that. So I didn't have a cycle, right? And on IUD, I don't have a cycle. So I didn't have any of those cycle changes telling me that something was going on. Because I didn't have that as sort of a benchmark, the things that were happening to me never occurred to me that they were hormonal. I literally thought I was just losing my mind. I thought I was losing who I was. For me, it was late 30s, like 39 to 43 was an absolute just smack in the face with a brick wall. You know, it was the foggy brain. It was the sort of flat affect, not really getting up with life and not really getting down with life. Definitely loss of libido, questioning what was wrong with me because I loved my husband, but I just had I just had nothing left to give. Couldn't get through my day without lots of lists. And I was at a very high level performing as a rower competitively. And so my sports performance started to decline too, which of course, then you lean into the more is more, meant more training, you know, more adrenal taxation, all the things I shouldn't have been doing. But that was kind of what I was going through. And again, my mom had surgical menopause at 32. So she had nothing to offer in terms of information for me. And because I had no cycle, I had no wherewithal that this was hormonally related. So I was living in Boston at the time, home of conventional medicine, big pharma. And so I'm going to my doctor. I'm like, is it mold? Could I have Lyme's disease? You know, I was begging for something to explain why I was suddenly losing my grip of who I thought I was and just how I could perform and function as a mom, as a spouse, as a athlete, as a career person. So, of course, I was gaslit. You're too young. No, we're not going to test your hormones. Absolutely refused. And at that time, I was leaning into nutrition as being a very low hanging fruit for sort of addressing some of the things I was dealing with. And I'd gone back to nutrition school and I started working with women. And I'm realizing these women of all shapes and sizes, but all about my age, are dealing with the same thing. So what's the one common denominator, right? We're all heading towards menopause. That was kind of the ding, ding, ding for me that this is hormones. And then, you know, I too started like, I got to find solutions. I'm an attorney. So my attitude is like, solve the problem, figure it out. And quickly came to the realization that it was hormones. And I will never forget my first week on HRT. I called, and I was 48 at the time too. I call Maria and I'm like, is this possible that like everything's working better, especially down there? And
Right.
she just broke up laughing at me and she was like, yep. And I'm like, it's been like 4 days. How is that possible? But it went to show the power of those hormones and like how desperately my body was starving for them. So like you just mentioned, I mean, I won't look back. You know, those hormones are now locked in. You're going to pry them from my cold, dead hands. But it did improve. It improved my body composition and improved my sleep. It improved my mood. Like I feel like I'm engaged with life again, which I felt like there'd been years, almost a decade that I wasn't. And, you know, relationship with the hubby is the best it's ever been in 37 years. Sex is great. You know, cognition is wonderful. We're running a very successful business together. It requires a lot of demands on us. And I feel like I'm capable again. And that was the biggest thing for me is like, wow, I didn't lose that self.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
You said something that's very important. I want to touch on it right now. Nutrition. You both FDN, functional diagnostic nutritionist, board certified nutritionist. You guys are both in that nutrition space. You know the importance of food. You know the importance of lifestyle. And yet still, so the question is change of lifestyle and change of nutrition enough for women going into menopause to get their life back, just like you described? Or do we need HRT as well?
So I think we're going to have slightly different responses on this, although we literally agree on almost everything in life in general.
Okay.
But so anyway, let me explain. I was just in Italy for a couple of weeks and I met this woman who moves from Germany, to buy a place in Tuscany, and she husbands her own animals and grows everything on the farm, and like literally everything is organic, farm to table. And her sons all work on the farm, and she was, I would say, kind of mid 70s. She was teaching us cooking classes and teaching about the land, and I was like, I don't think she's on HRT. I could be wrong, but if I had to guess, I would say I don't think she's on HRT. I mean, she was full of passion and vigor, and she loved what she did. And I was like, if we could maybe live in a bubble, right?
Right.
The bubble that is the organic farms in Tuscany that were all surrounding her were organic as well. And you love what you do, and you have a supportive partner, and maybe low or no stress from children that you have. And I was like, she seems like she's doing great, and she's not on HRT. So I would concede that it is possible. However, I think for 99% of women who are leading a modern day life, and as much as I don't want to admit, I'm leading a modern day life. I live in a subdivision. I probably don't have low VOC paint on my walls. I eat seed oils on occasion in restaurants, what have you. Right. I also do lots and lots of good stuff, filter my water, but like, it's not enough for me. It's just not. Yeah. It's just not. And I would say, I don't think it's enough for most women either. And I think those that think it's enough, their 40s, maybe early 50s, maybe they are menopausal for a year and they just still have something on board, whether that's a little bit of adrenal production or just a kind of like a holdover, a little bit of estrogen. But I think you're taking a chance by not using HRT, honestly, by not using it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And newsflash, I don't disagree with her.
Okay. Okay, good.
But no, I mean, I think Maria's point is that, we lack the nuance to recognize that there are those who live in, beautiful synchronicity with the circadian rhythm, and, they offload their stress and they do all these things, and that's great. And that might mitigate a lot of things. We don't know how that woman's plaque accumulation may or may not be in her arteries, and it may just not be symptomatic yet or whatever. But I do agree that for the vast, vast, vast majority of living a modern lifestyle, not addressing our stress, focused on these symptoms and doing these things, no, it's not. We just don't think it's even safe, honestly, to age without your hormones intact, simply because there are so many things happening beyond the obvious symptoms that you cannot identify until they finally make themselves known. And it's usually a little too late to reverse the damage. So, that's just kind of our take is if women understood what the menstrual cycle represented and what those sex hormones represented when we were younger, they would start to question, why do we want to live without them when we're older? We have this celebration around losing our menstrual cycle. And I'm like, do you really understand what that means?
Yeah.
Right.
So what does that mean? Just for people that are like,
Yeah. So, I mean, if we look at the phases of the menstrual cycle, right, we see this beautiful rhythmic dance. I mean, many women don't realize that they have a rhythmic dance between estrogen and progesterone, that progesterone is really not on board during the follicular phase beyond maybe some adrenal production and tissue production. And so we have this estrogen comes and does its thing on day 12, it peaks, it starts to fall. We have a little bump in testosterone, and then we have progesterone kick in and another peak. Those aren't just to prepare an egg for fertilization. They aren't just to create an, endometrium that's going to shed and cause a menstrual bleed. That beautiful rhythmic dance and that sort of handoff between the 2 or 3 hormones is actually about genomic signaling throughout the body. And everything that we kind of attribute to fertility and menstruation actually should also get credit for bone remodeling, your skin elasticity, your muscle and joint health, literally everything, your liver function, your LDL receptors to clear cholesterol in the liver, like your gut microbiome, the receptors that line the lumen, everything in there is also being impacted and controlled to a large degree by that rhythmic dance. So if we celebrate the loss of the menstrual cycle, we celebrate maybe, okay, I'm done with the risk of having children. What we're also involuntarily celebrating is the loss of that genomic signaling. And I think that's really dangerous for women to kind of overlook or not understand, because this is why our bones become porous. This is why our heart disease starts to accumulate. This is why our blood pressure changes. We could go on and on and on. And for every woman, it can be very different. And so we don't have this sort of straight timeline with expectations of when something's going to fail. And if women just understand that as those hormones are declining, these things are happening to larger or small amounts, depending on the woman, we're all in the same boat, right? So why would we want to get rid of those hormones?
Right. No,
Yeah.
I agree with both of you on the HRT. Again, you'd have to pry my hormones out of my dead cold hands, just like you with my thyroid medication. So because it does so much. Now, my symptoms were not horrendous either.
Yeah.
Entering into really even in perimenopause, I did not have bad symptoms, a little bit of vaginal dryness, the occasional hot flash, but I always am warmer than everybody else around me anyway. So I didn't even know if it was a flash or if it was just like, can you turn the damn temperature down in this room? Please. Thank you. But I also mentioned thyroid, and in your book, you have the term that I always say on here, thyropause.
Mhm.
And I had the question the other day. It was posed to me by a male doctor. And I'm actually impressed that he thought of this and said this. He asked me, well, can't we pretty much assume that any woman that is in menopause has a thyroid problem? I paused and I was like, we're probably at about 99%. I mean, because there is thyropause that happens. Now,
Yeah.
so the first question is, can either of you define that term? I've said it a ton, but I want to hear it from you since it's in the book. And number two, do you both have a thyroid issue as well that maybe popped up in menopause?
I would say thyroid is really kind of similar to what's happening to the ovary. Similar, not exact. It's just a slowing down of the thyroid with age. I think we have to expect that some of these things just happen with age. And, when we lose, again, Kristen just kind of mentioned something. Hopefully people got it about the rhythmic dance of the two main female hormones, right? And when that goes, it does affect the thyroid as well. But yeah, so, I look back at my historical labs of 43, 44, 45 years old, and I had beautiful T3 of like 3.5. And I had, I guess my TSH was always between 1 and 2. And jeepers, I mean, it's just not that way anymore. It's just not. I mean, free T3, if I'm lucky with medicine lately, seems to be 2.7 or 2.8. I know it still needs a little bit of help. TSH is definitely has been very slowly climbing over the years. So yeah, we both support thyroid health for sure.
Okay, so you are on thyroid replacement. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I see the thyroid, it's such a delicate gland, it's just, we've got to really love it. And I think when we look at its unique sensitivities to nutrient deficiencies, and then we kind of overlay this change in gut health with menopause and nutrient absorption, we have that. We know that the loss of estrogen affects mitochondrial function across all cells. So if we're going to have a thyropause, we can probably point to some mitochondrial changes happening. Mm-hmm. So I think there's so much kind of like hand in hand with maybe the impacts of menopause across these body symptoms that are then triggering these impacts in the thyroid. For me, because I had the IUD, once I had it taken out, I was already menopausal. When I actually hit menopause is anyone's guess, but my physician team believes it was probably in my early 40s, which tracks completely with the severity of my symptoms, how badly the wheels came off for me. Yeah. I also then pulled, God bless my chart and having the electronic highway for data. I pulled my old labs and I saw that back when I was 42, my TSH was 5.6.
Oh,
nobody ever said anything to me. So at 48, 49, I'm, well into menopause. I'm on HRT, but there's that like missing link, right? Mm-hmm. That just even the best HRT wasn't quite helping. And when we finally turned my attention to my thyroid, I mean, my free T3 was like 2 and my TSH was off the charts and nobody had bothered to even check. And God bless my HRT provider who was like, hold the force. You need some, thyroid replacement. So I'm on it now. And it literally, we keep a spreadsheet. Marie and I are a little bit geeky. We look at our labs every quarter. And I have a spreadsheet that goes back the last, 6 years. And it shows when I started HRT and then when I started thyroid on top of HRT. And then the next thing, which was for me actually adding some DHEA, because I know for me, a lot of my problems definitely stem to some adrenal issues. So those 3 things, like drastic improvements each time. So even the best HRT had its ceiling in terms of improvements for me. And taking the thyroid to the next level was like the game changer. So yeah, I think it's really real. And I think women, again, go to that medicalization. Don't tell me I'm deficient. Don't tell me I need medication. I'm going to fast my way into a vaginal lubrication. Who knows what the hell they're thinking, but
Right.
it's sort of this approach of like rejecting all possible exogenous interventions. And Maria and I are like, why? We would never tell a diabetic, just try and do it without the insulin.
Yeah.
Right? Like nobody would say that.
Right.
So when we look at those things and recognize that disease processes are at risk, why would we not then address the thyroid, right? Especially if women are catching men in heart disease in their 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Do we all not appreciate how relevant the thyroid health is for our cardiovascular disease health? So those sorts of things, Maria and I are like, look, you can choose to reject these things now, but you better accept the fact that by 70, you're probably going to have about 4 or 5 scripts, if not 10 or 12 that you're taking daily, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So like, why wait? Why not take natural medicine that we have at our disposal to address these things?
Yeah, 100%. Do you know, I actually heard this the other day, and this is what drives me crazy about these hormone clinics that are literally on every corner. This one woman said, well, I go to this hormone clinic, but the practitioner there said, I don't do thyroid.
Right.
And I'm like, you can't do one without the other. They
No.
go together. You can't. And that just tells me that these clinics are they're just throwing out hormones left and right,
Yep.
cookie cutter. I mean, it just drives me crazy. But thyroid is a huge component as we age.
Yeah. I mean, we have the menopause gold rush. We need to have the Thyropause gold rush next, right?
It's
We
true.
get people on board. And the thing is, women don't understand that when we always have binding proteins in our blood that, you know, are kind of doing a delicate dance, controlling the exposure of our receptors to different hormones. But when we use exogenous hormones, usually through HRT, we will have an increase in binding proteins. That's normal. That's a normal response to the body from an exogenous hormone being provided. But
Yep.
what that does for a lot of women is unmasks in a really fast fashion a slowing thyroid, because suddenly our thyroid hormones are bound up in these proteins as well. And so that's one thing that we think is really a mistake, that if your HRT provider can't and doesn't also manage your thyroid, that's a huge red flag and a huge problem, because now they've just got back into that siloed system of they've got one bogey in mind and they're not thinking about the whole system.
Yeah, it's no better than conventional medicine then. You're getting
Correct.
the same treatment just like you would at the sick medicine doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I want to talk about gut. And in your book, you mentioned estrobolome, and we have not talked about that on this podcast in depth. What I find interesting is so many women, just like we just talked about, so many women have thyroid issues. So many women are gaining weight as they enter menopause. They're like, I haven't changed anything. So we have to look at hormones, thyroid. So many women are like, I'm bloated. I'm bloated all the time. What is happening? And I will also hear that after we start someone on HRT,
Right.
which of course that can happen too. I'll let you talk about that. So what gives with the gut and perimenopause, menopause, hormones declining?
We lose microbiome richness and diversity when in the presence of low estrogen. And again, nobody makes this connection. And so
I have not heard this connection being made often at all. You know,
I know. Well, again, back to what we say probably in the beginning of the book is it's really not just about, sex hormones and fertility and, breasts and hips and, all those things. It's literally about the microbiome richness of your gut. So again, in a low estrogen state, in that postmenopausal stage of life, like women tend to have poor gut health. And as one of our kind of amazing mentors say that you will have leaky gut as a woman who is postmenopausal. It's just part of that aging process. It's hormone loss. And how that manifests, obviously the gut kind of branches out to everything in the body, but one very real way that it manifests is a lot of postmenopausal women are dealing with constipation. And I mean, that's just no good. It just has wide ranging implications for toxicity and detox. And then, talking about like some of these online clinics, right? These women will hear about HRT. It's a bit of a catch-22. It's like, okay, but the estrogen can, maybe help unlock that constipation. But if it doesn't, or if it doesn't do it quickly enough, then you risk, not properly circulating. that
Right.
estrogen. So that's where like nutrition and comes into play as well.
So how about this one? I bet you didn't know that thyroid disease is one of the fastest growing chronic health problems in the United States, with more than 12% of Americans developing a thyroid condition at some point in their lifetime. If you're a woman, probably about 95%. But we all know that a strong thyroid can help speed up your metabolism and keep you feeling fit and energized. So we have to protect it. And one of the best ways is with minerals. For its size, your thyroid actually uses more minerals than any other organ in your body. It needs close to a dozen different minerals. We talk about this all the time: selenium, zinc, iron, iodine, magnesium, all vitally important to the thyroid and for converting your inactive thyroid hormone to your active thyroid hormone. And they work together, all of these minerals. But getting plenty of minerals is hard. It's hard to do with the current supplement situation out there. This is why I love and use daily Beam minerals. They make mineral supplementation easy. You don't need a dozen different pills. Just a single 1 ounce shot of Beam contains every essential mineral your body needs in the right ratios. Because they're derived from humate, which is an ultra mineral rich component of soil, Beam minerals come in an ionized liquid form that's super bioavailable. So you're going to absorb almost 100% of the minerals that you take. Beam also helps your body absorb your thyroid medication better as well. So bonus, you can replenish your mineral stores and support your thyroid in 30 seconds a day, maybe 10 seconds. Go to Beam Minerals, BEAMMINERALS. Use the code Dr. Amy for 20% off your first order. That's DRAMIE. And side note, I give them to my dog in a smaller amount, and I give them to my plants that were dying and they started to flourish. So imagine what your body can do with these minerals.
Yeah. I think another area that people overlook when it comes to the gut is our digestion. And our digestion is impacted again by our sex hormone status. We're going to sound like a broken record here, but even the parietal cells in the stomach are highly dependent on sufficient estrogen to release the right gastric secretions in order to properly break down food before we dump it into the small intestine. And we all know that if we pound a meal real fast, we don't digest it well, right? We end up with that bloat, or we overdrain fluids while we're doing something. It's no different. If our estrogen is low, we actually don't get a really robust breakdown of the food in the stomach. The pH level is not quite correct when it drops into the small intestine. That then triggers the cascade, or fails to trigger the proper cascade of pancreatic enzyme secretion and, all the different things that are going on, bile acids, et cetera. So we have kind of this two-stage problem, right? Is a slowing digestion along with then a gut microbiome that lacks the diversity to sort of make up what it needs to get the fuels it needs to create different species and whatnot. Butyrate production, all of that sort of stuff gets changed. And one of the things that drives us nuts is a lot of women will be told, you have GERD, you need this acid blocker, right? Okay, well, ladies, you have GERD because you actually have a sphincter that's not closing and is allowing gastric secretions up. That's not that you have too many gastric secretions or too much. It's actually you need that sphincter to be better, properly controlled. And guess what also has to do that? Estrogen, right? And so we maintain kind of the esophagus and this firmness of those structures and elasticity and all that stuff with proper sex hormones. So women then will say, oh my gosh, I have all these stomach problems. And a doctor will say, let's test you for H. pylori. And then they go in and they test them for H. pylori, a bacteria that's totally normal to have. And fun fact, is actually required in what we call the estrobolome, which is that basket of bacteria that's proper for metabolizing and detoxing.
Just don't want too much.
Yeah, but you don't want too much. But so what they'll do is then they'll put them on some protocol, usually antibiotics, but otherwise something like oregano oil for a year. And they try and wipe out these people's gut bacteria that actually is beneficial for maintaining that hormone circulation. So there's this horrible kind of approach to the problem. And if women just understood that, start some HRT, work on your detox in order to actually be excreting it by pooping regularly, ladies, things start to fall back in place. And why women have a shift in bloating when they start HRT is they're having sort of a remodeling of that gut microbiome. The diversity is changing, the quantity is changing. We don't always love the terms like die off and things like that, but there is a shift happening. and it will change. You just need to continue to support digestion and support your detox. It levels out.
I'm so happy that you said that. Well, there's something else I want to touch on too, and what people do for their gut. But I can't tell you the amount of women that come to me and say, well, I have H. pylori. Shouldn't I take care of that first? Like, no, it doesn't matter. Like, you can have that in your gut. Obviously, we don't want it in large quantities, but just like you said, small amounts of H. pylori, totally normal to have in your gut. And no, you don't want to treat that first. You want to actually do hormones and get your thyroid in check, because that's going to control whether or not you poop every day. And then you can go back and say, okay, do I still have these effects from the H. pylori? The other thing is, people are doing functional testing and they're almost basing how they feel on the results of the test.
Yes. And we just had this discussion with some of our mentorship students who are other practitioners kind of going into the space, as we said, they all are eager to test. And we think functional medicine testing has an absolute place at the right time. But the vast majority of women, if you just go into the trenches with them on lifestyle, stress, nutrition, movement, sleep, pooping, all those things, and work on basic interventions, most of them need some help in those areas. You don't need to test in order to tell them their digestion is off. They're living it. They came to you because they have this belly they can't get rid of, and they're burping all the time, and they don't sleep and they don't poop. You have what you need to know. Right. But I think sometimes there's a lack of motivation unless a woman has like cold, hard data to sort of convince her that she was right. There's something wrong. And we're like, but it's not the data that's the problem. It's the choices you're making every day that are the problem. And we need to address those.
All right. Now, what do women do about it? So I always joke about the Jamie Lee Curtis Activia. Like, all these women are running out and they're eating Activia yogurt to get their probiotics in. Or like we were talking about off air, they'll take the same damn probiotic for years on years. It's so bad. It's so bad. So why is that just not the right way to approach your gut at all?
Well, I mean, and think in terms of your gut, I think the things that Kristen said are all super necessary. They're just like the not sexy stuff. It's just, eating real food and, working on that, getting into parasympathetic mode, which is the just chill out mode, put the phone down, turn off the news, focus on chewing. Like, these things are really, really impactful. Keep the ultra processed foods out of the diet, or to a very minimum at least, right? And get the HRT on board if you're a candidate, and most women are. The amount of women that are candidates is very high. The amount of women that are not candidates is very low. And then, when it comes to HRT, we say get that on board, but learn first. Don't jump right in. I can't tell you how many women we have that just jump right into HRT, and they just either are underdosed or overdosed, or
no one's dealing with all those unsexy things. And that's, I loved your rant recently about online clinics, because this is something that we see happening. And our attitude is sort of, that's fine. Take those women, we might end up losing them as clients, but they're going to come back. And the reason they're going to come back is because nobody's working with them on the whole body.
Nutrition and mindset, what to expect, when you do onboard HRT.
Well, and I'm pretty sure Defy Medical is not asking their clients if they're pooping. I'm pretty sure that's not in their intake form, right? And that that piece of it needs to be in place. And we tell women all the time, if you had hormonal irregularities when you were younger, we can all usually go back to, poor lifestyle, poor nutrition, drinking too much, not sleeping, all the things. And then we clean it up, and then voila, the cycle is a wonderful place, and happy event each month. The same thing applies to HRT. We need to be a healthy host, whether we're making our hormones or we're taking our hormones. And so when it comes to the gut, are there some interventions that are perfectly reasonable? Yes, they should be targeted and short term, whether it's providing your gut certain nutrients, whether it's you need zinc carnosine or you need some sort of glycine and glutamine. I mean, there's different ways to approach it. Each one is different, but a lot of times it's just basically dialing down the stress. I mean, how many of us eat at our kitchen island, or God forbid, eat in the car? Or if you still have children at home, it's like kind of a tense environment at dinner because the teenager's pushing the buttons, or, whatever. But like, just starting to build some awareness about your engagement with food. Is it kind of under the optimal conditions? Is it the right food? Are you eating too often? So many people do not realize the digestive system needs a break.
Mhm.
And these women who are kind of following these metabolic eating patterns, and they're eating every 2 hours, 5, 6 times a day, that's a problem.
Yep.
We need to address that. Are we eating within a few hours of bedtime? Also a problem. Are we eating kind of against our circadian rhythm and light cycles? That's a problem. So basic things that can be instituted to sort of address that health. And a lot of times with women, we're like, you just chew your food to the point of applesauce. Like, I don't even tell them 10 chews or 30
Right.
chews or chew for a minute or anything. Just put your fork down and do not swallow until that food is applesauce. They'll be like, oh my God, my bloating went away. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
bingo. And then it creates that cascade, right? They're digesting, the gut starts to be happier, the poop starts flowing, and that's the perfect environment for hormones.
Yeah.
That's so good. That is
Yeah.
so good. Well, it's also important to be pooping every day, like you said, for the estrogen metabolism and just for overall detox. I mean, we're going to get to the liver. We want to love on the liver,
Yeah.
but everything that we're exposed to, we're in such a toxic environment, and that toxic environment is pounding our hormones as well.
Right.
And most likely contributing to early menopause and needing for surgical intervention to basically push someone into an early menopause. But we need to somehow get our bodies to the place where it acts like it should. Like, we are meant to poop after a meal. Now, I'm not a gastroenterologist, so I don't know how many hours it's supposed to be, but I do know that every time I eat, at some point in time, shortly thereafter, it shouldn't be 2 days from now that
Right.
food comes back out. And,
Right.
and that's part of detox. A lot of people don't care. And, oh, yeah, well, I ask that question, how often do you poop? Oh,
Yeah.
like every other day, every third day. I'm like, oh, no, that's horrible.
Right.
So all of those toxins, how are the toxins affecting our entire body and directly our hormones?
We have this buildup of an enzyme called beta glucuronidase, which what happens is it will kind of, so estrogen is either made or taken, right? So made in our ovaries, taken, kind of has to signal at the receptor, and then it has to detox out of the body. It eventually kind of ends up in feces and urine, right? But during that process, it gets bound to bile.
Mhm.
And it's the glucuric acid is actually good. I'm sorry, there's so many terms I get them mixed up.
Scratch that.
But
Not
so
the
the
glucuric acid.
beta glucuronidase is an enzyme that we don't want too high, because it can kind of, it just kind of decouples the bile with the toxins, and it allows it to recirculate. So
And can reactivate too, right? It can go from a deactivated estrogen through the process of detoxification to a reactivated estrogen. So you're circulating suddenly no longer metabolites, but almost this reactivated estrogen. If you're still taking it, or you're still making it, or you're taking high doses of it, now it's almost like, for lack of a better term, kind of a double dose, right? Because it's still in the system. You've now got this extra tissue exposure.
And so we tend to see that high enzyme that we don't want too high in women that are constipated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
common. Yeah.
And then she'll move into estrogen dominance, even in a menopausal state. She can move into estrogen dominance because she's not actually getting rid of that excess estrogen.
Yeah, that's not like a true estrogen like dominance, but just sort of like almost
An imbalance with the
or like an an overload of more kind of xenoestrogens.
Yeah.
Toxic estrogens. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
she'll still get symptoms from that, right? Because I'll hear that from women that, oh, I think I'm estrogen dominant because, and then they'll list all the different symptoms that absolutely could be tied to estrogen dominance. But is it the xenoestrogens, or is it that maybe she's going to defy and getting too low of a progesterone dose, and she really is estrogen dominant in the fact that her progesterone's still in the toilet?
Well, it can be either that, or it can be something that this will probably blow some minds. So Maria just used the word receptor, right?
Mhm.
Our hormones are signals. They act at a receptor on the cell, and that's what kind of sends off the actions in the body. Well, What people don't realize, going back to that dance of our beautiful rhythm of hormones over a 28-day cycle, is that that peak of estrogen actually is responsible for producing receptors for progesterone. And so what we often see is these women are told they're estrogen dominant. They're given boatloads of progesterone because that must be there to offset the estrogen, but their estrogen levels are super low. Dance, they don't have the receptors for that progesterone. And what ends up happening is usually bloat, some water weight gain, breast tenderness, moodiness, anxiety, all of these things. And the doctor's attitude is like, you must need even more progesterone. And so they keep, and we'll see these women on these like tiny little patches and like 400 milligrams of progesterone. And they're like, but I sleep great. I'm like, that's because it's knocking you out. That's actually not sleep. That's called unconscious. And you have yeah, you have too much progesterone now at this point. And you're still not pooping, by the way, because you still don't have enough estrogen, right? And so now you've got kind of this backlog of both hormones. And it's just really tragic that that system is not kind of acknowledged and honored in traditional HRT right now, because these women are being told you must be progesterone intolerant. And Maria and I say in 99% of the instances, you're actually so estrogen deficient that you can't take and handle the progesterone because you have no receptors for it.
Okay. So what is there a way to enhance receptors? I've heard some, I mean, really well-respected doctors in this space, and they have their own supplement line. And I've heard some say that they have, it's basically like a hormone receptor cleanup.
Right.
I mean, who knows? I think there's still a lot we don't know about receptors. And I think receptors is going to come down to living a daily detox life as you are able to, and nutrition is important.
Nutrition and digestion, because you have to absorb the nutrients that you're eating. And I would say the one thing we do know about receptors is your mineral status matters in a big, big, big way. And there is to me this wild zinc deficiency happening. We're seeing it in all the women that we're working with. And of all micronutrients, the one most critical for all hormone receptors, thyroid and sex hormone, is zinc.
Pulls it into the receptor.
Yeah. And it's difficult to get enough because if your gut is impaired, your gut is going to suck that zinc up big time. And now you don't get the blood serum circulation of zinc that you need to sort of heal, or whatever you want to call it, rehabilitate those receptors to come back online. And a lot of women don't want to accept that, the use of birth control pills or, IUDs that they were told were local, but actually have systemic effects. They don't want to address the fact that that nutrient depletion might have left them without really great receptor status. And so their on-ramp with HRT may need support that's sort of outside the realm of Defy Medical, where they're not dealing with the gut issue, they're not dealing with the absorption issue, and they're not dealing with supplemental micronutrients if they in fact need that for the receptors.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, zinc deficiency is huge, and zinc is even imperative in that T4 to T3 conversion.
Absolutely.
So that deficiency is going to have widespread effects on the body. Widespread.
And just pouring more hormones into that body is not going to help if you don't address that underlying issue, right?
Right. Yeah, and I know we're all in favor of using the hormone dose that you need. Right. But you don't want to keep doing that if you're not addressing the receptors and not addressing your deficiencies that you might need to look at.
Totally agree.
So I want to shift this a little bit to libido and sex, because this is such, I can't even tell. Listen, I did a full podcast called All About Libido. I tried to hit every single reason why a woman may have low libido. And I don't even know if I hit them all because there's so many different reasons. I want to get your take on this, especially as in the book, you talk about it. So what is your take on this drastic decline in libido where women will say, and it's one thing if you need a spousectomy. I mean, that is totally different. If you're married to an asshole, then, that's something different.
Yeah. But we will say this to the outset. It's not for lack of testosterone, ladies. Okay. It's not for lack of testosterone. Yeah. I mean, libido is so multifactorial. And it's one of those things that we've decided as a society to simplify it straight down to, you must be hormonally deficient if you don't have a libido. And I'm like, I don't know. Are you happy in your relationships? Do you have community? Do you sleep? Because I don't know about you, but when I'm tired and I hit the bed and it's like, I just want to be horizontal and someone else wants to get frisky, I'm like, please God, just leave me alone. I
Right.
just want to sleep. Right. So, is it all of these other things? And I think we're not recognizing our stress, that stress impairs our hormone uptake, whether again, we're making it or taking it. And so these clinics that are just trying to shoot a pellet in a woman's rear end and jack her testosterone to super physiologic levels so that she's at risk of getting an Adam's apple and a voice box change. Guess what, folks? It still doesn't help your libido. And these women will be like, I'm chasing my husband around, whatever. I'm like, that's great. That's short-lived. Watch. And of course they crash and burn.
Yeah.
What women don't appreciate is it's actually estrogen that impacts libido the most. And we have, unfortunately, a crisis of low dosing estrogen in this country, largely driven by the medical societies that are the conventional physicians sort of,
Still afraid of estrogen. They're still afraid of, they're still afraid.
Still afraid of it. And why then now we have this groundswell of these NAMS practitioners who are saying testosterone shouldn't be denied from a woman. And we're like, but you're denying them estrogen. Like you're denying them physiologic levels of estrogen.
Right.
Right. And so suddenly estrogen's this thing that we want to kind of treat with kid gloves and be like all gentle and little bit and lowest doses and short time. But we're going to now raise the flag for testosterone. It makes zero sense to us. Testosterone is not what makes us a feminine woman with sexual desire. It is estrogen that makes us a feminine.
And it's enough. It's enough estradiol.
Enough estrogen.
Unfortunately, as Kristen alluded to, it's the typical kind of HRT that's out there being kind of talked about by a lot of doctors. They're doing a great job of raising awareness, but they're really keeping women in what we call very late stage perimenopausal, or in some cases, women with postmenopausal levels of estradiol, even though they are on HRT.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Those women, if it is in fact the estrogen that is going to kind of ignite their libido, notwithstanding the kind of spousectomy or just, general health status.
Right.
Those HRT regimens that they're doling out that are so popular right now ain't going to help.
Not going to help. No. We say there's a great podcast, doesn't compete with yours. So I feel like it's okay to say it, but no, Maria, the name of it just went completely out my, Foreplay Radio.
Oh, okay. All right.
And it's a sex therapist and a marriage therapist, a relationship counselor. And I find it fascinating because they cover all these things that I think a lot of us overlook as sort of getting in the way with libido. And a lot of it comes down to communication and stress and being able to find the love language that we need in order to have our needs met while also honoring our partner's needs. And that, I think, is what honestly is the biggest crisis. And there's times where we've said to women, we can't fix this for you. I don't think this is an estrogen issue or a testosterone issue or any of those things. Peruse these and look at these things. And it's shocking how when we finally want to sort of address that sex is a choice, libido is a choice to a certain degree. It's not just something that kind of overtakes us and boom, it happens, but that we have to engage with it and we need to be responsible for it. And so that's going to require communication, self-awareness, et cetera, meeting each other's needs. If you're not getting your needs met, let's say on the weekend and you're driving the kids around everywhere, or the spouse is off, on his boat sailing and leaving you behind or whatever, it's not a shock that come Monday, you don't feel like getting in bed with each other. Right. But no one wants to, and you might love him. He might not be someone that you need a spousectomy from.
Right.
But again, if your needs aren't being met on an emotional level, you're probably not going to be willing to deliver on a physical level. And I think women sort of fail to see that, because I remember once the book, what is it? Men are from Mars, Women are from Venus, right? Yeah. It came as a roadshow play years ago. My husband and I have been together 37 years. So this was decades ago, but it came as a roadshow play. And I remember cackling watching this and realizing that men are able to be like emotionally intimate after they've had sex. Women are able to have sex after they've been emotionally intimate. And that's 90% of the problem for most people who are lacking libido, is they've just kind of hit disconnect hard, and we just need to deal with it. Now, we don't want to gaslight the women who have tight vaginal tissues, dry vaginal tissues. And we've had clients who literally exercising in the gym results in vaginal bleeding because their tissues are so delicate. Yeah. We had a woman who needed a transvaginal ultrasound and they couldn't even get an imaging device up, not even the traditional wand, but something that they use like a flex sigmoidoscopy scope.
Mhm.
And we're
Yeah.
talking, that's a pediatric scope for the colon. They couldn't even get that used in her vaginal canal. That's an absolute failure of hormones. That is a lack of hormones. And so are there women for whom libido is lacking because it is painful and it is difficult? Absolutely. And those women need systemic hormones. Quick solution or quick way to address it would be topical vaginal hormones as well. But I
Mhm.
mean, that didn't happen overnight. And that's why Marie and I are kind of constantly banging this drum about pay attention, you ladies in peri, because that actually, those genital urinary symptoms and those changes are happening in perimenopause. And so all of a sudden a woman gets postmenopausal and she blames lack of sex hormones or lack of period for not wanting or not being able to have sex. We're like, that actually started almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does. And that's why, I mean, I'm a huge advocate. I'll ask you both as well. Start the hormones in perimenopause. Start them when they start to go off the cliff. That might be at 35 when your progesterone tanks, and then at 40 when your testosterone tanks. And maybe you're not ready for estradiol till 45. That's fine, but be ready to add it in as soon as it starts to decline, or catch it even in the decline.
So we are absolutely fans of that. I know I said earlier that I was fully menopausal by about 47 or 48. Can't remember exactly. It's been a while, but I wish I had started full replacement at 45. And as far as testosterone goes, like our take on that is if you're a 40-year-old, most of the times it's a libido or whatever, and they go and they get a testosterone prescription. We would just really, estradiol is your primary hormone, not saying you need it necessarily at 40, but we would really caution women to look to lifestyle and eating enough protein, ideally animal protein, weightlifting, getting morning sun, sleep, because you should be able to have a pretty good adrenal production of testosterone at say 40 years old. So that's just our take on it. We're not anti-testosterone, but we do kind of want to bring that there's just this trope going around like it's your most abundant hormone. Yes, volume wise, but that doesn't mean it kind of holds that same significance in what it does for you as a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. This tendency to give 40 somethings the testosterone is just so concerning because the 40 somethings we see are so depleted adrenally. They're just pushing hard and they're hanging on to that 30-year-old body. They're crossfitting 5 days a week or Orange Theory Fitness. They're not eating as well. They're leaning hard into the intermittent fasting because they feel the body composition changes from the changing hormones. And all of this stuff impacts their testosterone production adrenally. And how many of these doctors are diving into the lifestyle of this patient who's presenting as low testosterone and may in fact even have low testosterone production, but is it because of the normal decoupling of the hypothalamus and the gonads, or is it actually because they are depleting themselves, right? And so we think we've seen it. We've just seen it all too often where women are all of a sudden like, wow, all of this started to come back when I actually slowed down, ate enough, stopped working out too much, stopped my intermittent fasting, etc. They tend to not necessarily need the testosterone if they can at least commit to those lifestyle changes.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. The only thing I would just not even disagree, but add in would be, I know for me in my 40s, that's when I started testosterone because I am a type A driver running a business. I like working out. I want to have muscles. I want to be strong, like go, go, go. And I always call testosterone the get shit done hormone. When that goes down, it's like, oh, maybe I can do one interview today. All right. I go out to the gym and I'm like, why can I only do 4 push-ups when I could do 10 before? And I literally was looking in the mirror at my muscles deflating. It was like somebody popped a balloon. And they
have you ever looked into DHEA?
Yeah, it doesn't. So all of my research on DHEA, like speaking with people that research this, it's not strong enough to push testosterone to an optimal level. Like, yeah, it's a precursor, but it's just not strong enough.
I don't disagree with that, but don't you think from a vitality point, so using DHEA can sort of give women that drive that they suddenly felt fell off and is missing with their testosterone. I mean, it may not have, let's say, the muscular effect, right? Because we're not getting that signal in the muscle tissue. But I do think from like a vitality, sort of mood, affect, performance, all of that stuff, DHEA might be this first intervention for some women before they're ready for testosterone. So they work on those lifestyle things. You know, that probably wasn't your issue in terms of lifestyle stuff, but let's be honest, you came into this phase of life much healthier than most people and aware of kind of your daily interventions impacting those things. And we just see these young 30, late 30 somethings, early 40 somethings. We're like, you need to slow the frick down.
Yeah.
Like just slow down and take a breath. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, less is more. I'm only strength training 3 days a week and I'm sleeping. We're like, well, shocking.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sleep could grow your muscles too. Sleep can do a lot. Let's say it. Sleep is going to do a lot.
Yeah.
It's going to do a lot. Oh my God. I love talking to you guys. I'm looking at the clock. We're over an hour. I'm like, I could just keep going. I could keep going, but I've got to be respectful of your time. I have another interview, but this is just absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
It's amazing. And like I said in the beginning, and I am not just blowing smoke up your ass at all. This is, it's a manual. It's a manual. Now this is out now for people to get, correct?
September 10th.
September 10th. Okay.
Yep.
So September 10th, the Great Menopause Myth. I mean, they cover everything. I was so impressed when I read this because, you know, I mean, just like you mentioned earlier, menopause has almost become a buzzword, like functional medicine, right? Yeah. And everybody and their brother's a menopause expert, and everybody and their brother is writing a freaking menopause book, which is driving me batshit crazy.
A whole other hour about that.
That's a whole, that's a whole other thing.
God,
people who 2 years ago didn't practice in menopause-based medicine or HRT have best-selling books. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I pick up these books and I'll read a chapter and I'll put it down. I'm like, forget it. But I was riveted. I was like, oh my God, they covered everything. I love this. They covered it all. Like they hit this too. I highly, highly, with all of my heart, recommend that people get this book.
Thank you.
It's fantastic.
Really
that means a lot coming from you.
It means the world to us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for writing it because this is what we need. We don't need the 10 other menopause books out there. We need a guide. We need a guide.
We don't disagree. No.
We need one that's talking to us like this.
Yeah.
You know, just woman to woman. You know, you're going through some shit, right? Okay, we get it. We've been there, done that. Let's talk about it. And that's what this book is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So finally, can you tell listeners how they can find you? And obviously we'll put all the links in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So our Instagram is, we try to be educational on Instagram, and that's just Wise and Well if they put that into the search bar. Mm-hmm. And then our website is wiseandwell.me. And
yeah, we've got a free online community because let's face it, Instagram's kind of sound bites to a certain degree. So we wanted a place where we could do a little bit more long form content. Women could kind of peruse research without feeling like they needed to look at ads and political statements on social media. So we have a mighty network that you can look up. I think it's in our Instagram bio links, but we'll get you that link for that too. And it's free to join. And it's just kind of another safe place without a lot of noise that women can kind of find out they're not alone on this journey.
I love that. Well, thank you both for your time today and your wisdom and for writing the book. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.